So let me just ask, let's go broad a little bit here for just a second. So what era of work are we in right now?
Yeah, so you touched on this at the beginning, but in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, someone
Hmm.
would go to a university, they would get a job, or maybe they wouldn't even go to university, but they would go work for a company,
Yeah.
and the original skill set that they had would grow incrementally, but be relatively predictable throughout the entire course of their career. So, say 30 to 60 years. And if you take that timeline, so say 60 years, and you just shorten it, shorten it, shorten it, you can say like every decade you probably lost between 5 to 10 years of that relevance. So in
Mm.
the 80s or 90s, a degree would last 20 years. In the
Wow.
2000s, 15. And the science is telling us that we're headed towards a period, I think right now it's about 2.5 years for the average degree. So
Wow.
someone gets a degree, skills are relevant for 2.5 years until some significant upskilling has to happen.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Grow Yourself, your personal development school of growth, where we like to just bring on guests, experts, people with great stories, sometimes just really interesting people that can help us all learn, grow, and change even just a little bit every day or consistently or whatever the case might be. For a long time, we're handed a map and, and we study it hard. We pick a lane, we climb the ladder, we stay loyal, you wait your turn. But what happens when the ladder disappears? Or even worse, when you reach the top and realize it was leaning against the wrong wall? I think that's happened to many of us along the ways in some form or fashion. Today, work feels more fragile, it's more confusing, even for capable people who are doing, you know, who's doing everything right. I've often said this that many, many years ago, a few decades ago, corporate America, I would say, ruined it for everybody from this standpoint that there's this thing known as the psychological contract. And the psychological contract is very basic that when you join an organization, again, this was years ago, there's this just unwritten contract that I'll do this work for X amount and I'll stick around and we're good as long as I do my job and they in return pay me well and give me the right benefits and all that sort of thing. Just a basic contract. But I'm going to say somewhere around the 90s that corporate America started downsizing at a whim. I'd always show up on Monday morning and hear that, XYZ they laid off 20,000 employees. And I was like, what? How do you do that? I mean, how do you show up one day and realize, oh my God, we're 20,000 employees too heavy? Well, we know what they were doing. But what has happened over the years, I believe, is that now, the labor market has decided they're not loyal to us, so we're not loyal to them. So now that's where we're at. And I think this is creating some of this that we're talking about here, even today. So, so maybe the problem i- in today and the way that things happen now, maybe it is an effort. Maybe the rules have changed. In fact, we know the rules have changed. And so today I'm having a conversation with my guest about, what era of work we're actually in and how to move forward without panic, shame, blowing up everything and all that sort of thing. My guest, I'm so happy to have her with me, is Samantha Alvita. She is the founder of Work Rewritten, a platform helping professionals rethink how they navigate careers in an unstable job market. She's a career strategist, an educator, learning experience designer who's built programs at Masterclass and IDEO, if I got that right. She holds a master's degree in education from University of Pennsylvania, is ICF certified, which is International Coaching Federation, and is currently writing a book on career strategy. Sam blends design thinking, behavioral science, and strategic foresight to help capable people, stop guessing and start building a career that actually fits their lives. And I just think the combination of those three things is perfect. And I can't wait to have this conversation. Sam Alvita, thank you so much for joining me on Grow Yourself.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I'm very excited to be here.
it's I've had other guests on that talked about career things, but I think you're coming from a really interesting place that's going to, first of all, highly relevant. The timing is perfect. Whether you believe the job market is going up or down or whatever the case might be, it's I think what we can say over the last years, it's all over the place in some way of thinking. And so I think your expertise is going to be very, very helpful today. So listen, before we get started, can I just ask you to tell our guests, as I always do, who is Sam Alvita and who is little Sammy?
Yes, so you did a fantastic job iterating my bio coming in, but like you said, I'm come from an education background. So I started in the classroom in a very traditional teaching environment, and then
Interesting.
have slowly made a transition more and more into the creative space. So
Hmm.
adding psychology, adding different behavioral science techniques, and then adding design to get to where I'm at now. So that has been through a number of different companies, namely IDEO, which is a big design firm, and
Okay.
Masterclass. And at IDEO, I was in the future of work space. So essentially, what would happen is a client would come in with some large, complex problem, and we would be hired to solve that problem. So that could be
Love it.
anything from climate science issues to a company that isn't doing very well, or just a lot of the big problems that a lot of people are facing today. We
Hmm.
would do a very specific process called design thinking, human-centered design,
Yes.
another way of saying that. And it was really effective for helping people at a very large company level work through big problems. And so I decided to start applying it at an individual client level. So
Wow.
if a client comes to me and they're working through some big problem, we can apply these very expansive, very brainstorm focused, very test many directions forward kind of methodologies to help them work into the next phase of whatever their career is. And that has transformed into my current coaching practice where I do that at scale, and now will be in a book coming out
That's
at some time
fantastic.
soon.
Yeah. No, I love the idea that, again, I'm quite familiar with design thinking and on an organizational level, but yeah, bringing it down. I mean, the first thing that pops into my head is, this idea that mm, critical thinking, problem solving, decision making, it doesn't seem to be at the center. And I would even say for a lot of younger people these days that it's not, maybe there's just not enough emphasis for that. And I don't think it's going to get necessarily better with AI around because why should we think if AI will do it for us?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think to add to that in the career space, especially for the younger clients, so say the narrative that they're given is they go to a university, they graduate with whatever the degree is, they get
Yeah,
a job right after that university degree ends that lasts them for X amount of time where they can incrementally climb up. So they're an engineer,
interesting.
they go work for an engineering firm,
I
they
see.
continue moving forward. And I think because the system is not supporting that as directly or as well as it has in the past, they tend to shut down. And I think AI, to your point, has made this a little bit worse, where if they're applying to a job, it's not working, you engage with these AI tools, you
Yeah.
rely on these old systems, and just
Ooh,
doesn't work.
yeah.
um,
I honestly have mixed emotions about it because on the one hand, I use AI quite a bit now, just as sort of a fellow masterminder. What do you think about this? And literally go back and forth as I would in a mastermind group that I belong to. And it's profoundly good at helping me shake out my ideas and think through it. But on the other hand, to what we're talking about here, I think it will stifle our thinking because, oh yeah, I mean, it's just you could even use the I guess the metaphor, the analogy that it's like a muscle, your brain, and if you don't use it, then you kind of lose it. So, boy, I think particularly in your world, it's I don't know how you walk that razor edge line.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very tricky, and it's definitely something I talk about all the time with
Do
my
you really?
clients, where Yeah, I mean, for example, so say they have a resume that's very AI optimized, looks
Mm,
very AI. They are applying to jobs against a lot of other resumes that are also AI optimized. Everyone starts kind of looking the same.
yeah, no,
Um,
you got a point. Yeah.
yeah, to a point though where it's like, no,
Yeah.
you need to be an original writer, an original thinker, original person in this process to stand out. Like, don't over rely on like trying to optimize for this system. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, but it's tricky. I mean, and it's
Yeah,
very tempting, especially in
it
these
is.
points of anxiety where they're, yeah, trying to find their footing. I completely understand
Yeah.
why we've
You know,
landed here.
and on this point, I guess I would share personally that, to those listening, use AI, but use it as something to help you think, not just write. I mean, to just, like you said, you're right. I can almost spot AI in a second now, especially for, okay, I'll just keep going past that. But so let me just ask, let's go broad a little bit here for just a second. So what era of work are we in right now? I mean, how would you define that? What makes it fundamentally different today than another period of time?
Yeah, so you touched on this at the beginning, but in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, someone
Hmm.
would go to a university, they would get a job, or maybe they wouldn't even go to university, but they would go work for a company,
Yeah.
and the original skill set that they had would grow incrementally, but be relatively predictable throughout the entire course of their career. So, say 30 to 60 years. And if you take that timeline, so say 60 years, and you just shorten it, shorten it, shorten it, you can say like every decade you probably lost between 5 to 10 years of that relevance. So in
Mhm.
the 80s or 90s, a degree would last 20 years. In the
Wow.
2000s, 15. And the science is telling us that we're headed towards a period. I think right now it's about 2.5 years for the average degree. So
Wow.
someone gets a degree, skills are relevant for 2.5 years until some significant upskilling has to happen for that skill set to still be relevant. And
Interesting.
I've seen a lot of different predictions, but it looks like it's headed to anywhere from this 2.5 year gap down to maybe even 6 months, depending on how quickly, again, AI is doing what it's doing and skilling needs to become part of everyone's life. And I think, regardless of what career path you're in, 2.5 years is a very short period of time.
Yeah.
Um, so in some ways, that can be really scary, right? It sounds like, oh, I got this degree, I did all these things, and it's not going
Yeah.
to be worth it. It's not worth the money. It's not worth the like everything I put into it. And I'm going to have to make some big change in a very short period of time. And I think that is one way to look at it. And there's a lot to talk about with that. But I also think there is an immense amount of opportunity in this as well. So if there's an opportunity to reinvent your career and move and
Yes.
change every 2.5 years, there's like many, many lifetimes of things to learn and do and grow. And the people who
100%.
really optimize that are going to have an amazing time and really be in a really interesting space quickly. So I think
Wow.
that's a big part that I'm trying to move my clients towards is yes, this is happening, but let's look for the opportunities
Yeah.
for you.
I have a couple of thoughts. Wow, that's so good. One, when I graduated from high school, I didn't go to college. I went into the Air Force. I did 20 years in there. But for whatever reason, early in the 80s, after I got into the Air Force, I just got on this kick. I don't know why. I mean, I think I've always been a very curious guy, always. And so I'm sure that was probably mostly it, but I found myself just constantly trying to learn, constantly about everything. And then I did a little bit of college work while I was in the Air Force and then got out after 20 years. And when I was 40, I had the GI Bill, so I went and got a bachelor's and a master's degree. And just my whole life, if I look back on it, has been nothing but learning. And I can genuinely say that I love to learn. More. I'm just really a curious person. So that's one thing that I'd love to hear your thoughts about. But then the other part is, let me just ask you that about getting a college degree. I guess the second thing that I wanted to ask you was that it seems to me, this is the skeptic in me, that for the purposes more of money, that colleges required a whole bunch of stuff that would not necessarily be relevant to your life or your career. So I guess I'm trying to combine those two ideas that I did it very unconventionally. I've learned probably more outside of college than I did, and feel like I'm a very educated person right now. I don't say that from any standpoint other than to just suggest that the education can come from so many different directions. And with all that, Sam, I have no idea what the question is.
I think I can follow you though. I mean,
Please.
is there any university degree that leads to podcast host, right? As far as I'm
Okay, fair
aware,
enough. Yeah, that's a good point.
no.
That's a good
Yeah,
point.
so
Yeah.
and I mean a lot of the really cool career opportunities that are available now, there isn't necessarily a university major that directly
Yeah.
leads to that point. So
Yeah.
I think to your point about this lifelong learning, there's an amazing many paths that can come from that.
Oh, yes.
And I think to your point too about universities, and this might be a slightly hot take, but I am always very concerned when I get clients that have graduated in the last few months from a university and are not, and then come to me, where it's like, oh, the place
Oh,
that was supposed to set you up for a job didn't do that very
yeah.
well. And I would
Yeah.
argue that that would be the primary goal.
I
So I
agree.
think, yeah, there's more and more of that happening in a way that I do think universities really need to update their thinking and way of structuring their programming to set up students for the realities of today. Um, in a
Mm.
way that I think some that are not embracing these more conventional in quote paths or these latter paths seem to be thriving almost more because they're more flexible, more able to take advantage of opportunities and aren't so stuck in the thinking and past ways of doing things.
Yeah, no, that's so well said. I know at least one of my daughters. I remember this conversation. We probably had it with both, but with one of them, she was just so concerned that she did not know what she wanted to study in college. And I just remember thinking, and my wife agreed with me, listen, there's something to be said about going into college and kind of understanding the path that you want to take because you can, grab it quicker and then really, focus your academics around that idea. But you know this much better than I do. There are so many who go into college and don't know. And so I told her, I said, listen, treat at least your first year then, in this case, as exploratory. You're going to have to take, these, preparatory courses or, general eds and so forth. So just, but I encourage, I say, go talk to people. If you see somebody or talk to somebody who's doing a certain degree, ask them about it. Get really curious and just try to expand your mind about it. But I don't think universities are doing that either. They're not treating a lot of these students who don't know what they're doing with enough equipment or enough thinking to go, let me just expand my mind for a second here and see what happens.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think there's pieces of the way that a university degree is structured. So, college students need to get X
Yeah.
amount of credits to graduate. And
Yeah.
paying for an extra year of college is generally not something most people want to do. It's
Right.
expensive.
Yep.
So sometimes those exploratory times where maybe they need that extra year
Yeah.
to test things,
Yeah.
it's expensive. It doesn't fulfill the credit requirements. It doesn't do whatever
Right.
it is. Um,
Fair
Holds
enough.
people back.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, to your point though, I think it would be great if everyone had more opportunity to explore and expand. And I think especially the average 18-year-old going into these programs,
Yeah.
for the most part, is doing it with some type of belief about what a career would be that may or may not be
Yeah.
true to what it actually is. And I think a lot of people have that realization, say 5, 10 years into their career, where they're like, what am I doing? This is not really aligned with
Right.
me and what I
Yeah.
actually am interested in.
And certainly, my wife and I, we tried to help, guide, so that she was more prepared. But the closer that she got, the less understanding she had about what she wanted to do. And so we had to sort of, I guess you could say, acquiesce and say, well, listen, I mean, you're going to have to figure it out. I mean, we can offer you some ideas and advice, but in the end, this is going to be your career. So, Sam, you say that the old career map is broken. What's broken about it, or what assumptions do we have that maybe they don't hold anymore?
Yeah, so I would say this prevailing narrative of a career ladder is still very, very
Mm,
present. So like we
mm,
said, get degree, go to company, work incrementally up that ladder. So individual contributor to manager to senior manager to director, on until what it used to be, which is pension, retirement, etc. And there were these really predictable paths that someone could stay at a company for that long time. And in
mm.
some careers, a very select few, this still holds. Or there are very predictable paths. So, say medicine, as an example. If someone wants to become a doctor, there's a
Yeah,
very direct set of steps they have to take to do
that's right.
that. They lead to the places that the person thought they would lead to,
Hmm.
and they become a doctor. But then I would say for most other careers, there are a lot of different things happening that are breaking this ladder system. So, one being that the predictable path that leads to stability is shaky at best. So, say someone gets a great job, they go to a company, that company might have layoffs very quickly, to your point of a lot of
Yeah,
people are on these at-will contracts, they lay off 20,000 workers. There's truly nothing personal about being laid off in a pile of 20,000 people.
right.
There's nothing a
No,
person can do about that. And they end up back in this system. And I would say, even just from a layoff perspective, I don't know the exact percentage off the top of my head, but almost everyone today will experience at least 1 to 2 layoffs in their career if they're in corporate America.
yeah,
So even to stay at one place becomes close to impossible. And then if they are staying at the one place, there is a stability and a lack of a predictability that's promised that usually isn't delivered on. So say someone is supposed to get promoted every 2 years, nothing is necessarily making sure that they're skilling in a way that would do that, setting them up for success. I've heard a lot of recent clients be like, "Oh, I was supposed to get promoted, but then the business was like, oh, it's not in our business needs. It's too expensive." And it's like, well, what are you supposed to do with that? I
right.
mean, again,
Yeah,
it's not personal, it's just
yeah,
the reality. And I think the more that people stay in the same place, the more money, potential, opportunity that they're leaving on the table. So it's actually advantageous for most career paths to kind of be jumping around,
mm,
negotiating salary in these different moves and taking control over their own skilling and their own
I
way of
love that.
navigating this world. Um, and but it's tricky, right? Because there's a lot of pieces
Yeah,
of that that become, yeah, much more self-driven, more autonomous. Like they need more vision, they need more clarity. And I think that's what is starting to break down for some people, where it's hard to figure out like what is the best next step? Like how do I
yeah.
retain my agency in this process? And how do I take advantage of the opportunities that are becoming available?
Gosh, that is so smart. And I love what you're saying there because I 100% back what you're saying that however you do that, and there, and depending on, of course, whether you're relatively unskilled or a new employee in a career or even a seasoned one, that the mindset in my way of thinking should always be that I'm in control of my career. Again, how you play that, you're not going to be demanding as a brand new employee, but at the same time, you're you're going to want to have some say in where this all goes. And so to me, it's just more of a, comes down to a degree to your soft skills and your thinking skills and how can I navigate this and feel like it's going in the direction that I want to. Maybe I have to back off a little bit and just wait. You know, do you agree with what I'm saying here? But well, you just said it, but the idea is don't hand that out to anybody. That your career path and your and everything that you want out of your life.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I think, yeah, it's tricky, but it's
It's
definitely
tricky.
very, very important, and I think becoming increasingly so.
Yeah, no, that's really terrific. So, what are people coming to you about? Is there a pattern that you're seeing here that when somebody's seeking your services, is there a pattern as to what you're seeing there? Is somebody saying I just got laid off, or are they saying I have no idea where I'm going anymore. I got this job, don't like it, yada yada.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's a couple of reasons that people come to me. One, the recent layoff, very common. The other
Sure.
one being I'm miserable. I'm not
Yeah.
making the money I want to make. I'm not doing the types of projects I want to do. And third is like some of the bigger career transitions. So say
Mm.
someone is an attorney, but they want to become a graphic designer.
Yeah.
How do they
Yeah.
make that make sense to someone to get hired
Yeah.
as a graphic designer?
Yeah.
And so I would say all three of those paths kind of take the same format in my coaching practice.
Okay.
So I follow a four-part format. So I call it RISE, but it's R for recognize, I for initiate, S for serve, and E for evolve. So the R for recognize is diagnosing like exactly what's going on in their specific world. So take your attorney that wants to become a graphic designer. There's a lot of like, okay, well, how did we get here in the
Yeah.
first place? What do you actually need to do to follow this path? What skills need to be built? And also how to craft a narrative and a personal brand that fits this transition really nicely. That's a really big one. So recognizing that, but also maybe the patterns. That could be anything from like, oh, well, my dad said I needed to stay in a career for at least 10 years to be loyal and look loyal for a job.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, and that's a super common one that
Is it
is
really?
hard.
Interesting.
Yeah. Of just like, you need to, there's a lot of rules, right? Like, you need to
Okay.
stay in a place for at least 2 years. You need
Yeah.
to not jump too quickly, be promoted at least twice before you move. And there's very little truth to most of these rules. I mean, but they are very, very pervasive and very present for
Very
a
interesting.
lot of
Before
people.
you move on to I,
Yeah.
though, I want to ask this because I was thinking it earlier. There's also this, I don't know if I'd call it a trend, but maybe where a lot of young people, they want to move up too fast. They get into a position and suddenly they're like thinking about the next position. And I'm always kind of thinking, I mean, really show your stuff in this, be patient, show your stuff, show what you can do, and that will come pretty naturally, more or less. Are you running into that as well, or do you recognize what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. And I think there is a lot of truth to what you're saying, which is like, yeah, if you're in a job for 2 months and you're like, I'm ready to lead this team, there's
Exactly.
probably a lack of
I've seen
humility
that.
that may be an issue. Yeah, lack of
Yeah.
understanding maybe of how to
Yeah.
do that. But I do think if there is a younger person who's in a job and there is like an almost immediate discomfort where they're like,
Yes.
oh, I want to be doing more. Oh, I wish I could engage more with this. I think there are some really interesting
Fair enough.
lessons to be learned from that and maybe some clues as to what paths to take, maybe taking on additional projects, maybe additional skilling on their side. That isn't necessarily like promote me, but it's like if you're bored, boredom is
That's
a
right.
great sign and that's definitely something to be addressed.
Well said. And so all of that probably kind of goes with the R, right? Because it sounds like the R is a sort of a self and situational awareness type thing.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's something that a lot of people will do well too. So say someone comes to me, they're miserable. They've already recognized that they're miserable, something's wrong, they're not doing something correctly.
Yeah.
Which is what brings us to the I. And I think the I is the really tricky one, which is like, okay, so this is true. How are we going to initiate that next step? Especially if they want a bigger change, a bigger promotion, a bigger they want to move, they want to switch industries, they want to start their own podcast. Like, what does that look like to actually get the momentum going and get them to the place they need to go? And this, again, is very, very different depending on the industry, but can look like networking. It can look like
Ah,
taking on a personal project. It can look like research. It can look like using AI tools to diagnose strategy. It can look like a million things. But I think that taking the step forward and taking steps that really work well is where that career strategy piece comes in. And this is where I see the majority of my clients struggle the most.
very interesting. It makes sense to me. Tell me again what stands for.
Initiate. So
Initiate. Okay.
initiate that
Yeah,
next
yeah.
step.
Got it. Very good. Yeah. And when you say initiate, you're also saying that initiate might mean thinking it through more, and planning and that sort of a thing, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect.
And getting a really, really good strategy and sticking to that
Yeah.
strategy and a modern strategy. I think that's also really key.
Yeah.
Of if we're in this AI era, what does that look like today? It probably doesn't look like the advice you were given before.
Very interesting. I think I'm going to ask you about that. So you can either answer that now or after. But that, I think that's an interesting idea, a modern strategy. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, I mean, go for it if you have a question or I can.
Yeah, what is a modern strategy as compared to more, I guess, what a more traditional strategy?
Yeah, okay. So let's take someone who's been laid off. Let's say they worked in marketing. They got laid off from a big firm. It happened. It is what it is. They end up with me. And so the more traditional strategy would be like make your resume, like update that
Mm,
resume, update the cover letter, um, reach
yeah,
out to people you know. And sure, there's some truth
of
to all of
course.
that. That's fine. But exceedingly what's happening is then they apply to a million jobs and they wait for months and months and months. And they, even if they're very qualified, they come from a great place, there's a pretty big delay using that traditional strategy, where it may take a very long time for them to get their next role. And this is where it's like, okay, so are we engaging the modern version of the strategy? And so
Interesting.
the modern version would look much more like, okay, so what skills specific to the AI era that we're going into are relevant to marketing? So, like, how can I be at the forefront of the tech, and is that reflected in my resume? Am I
Mm,
using all of the different tools to their best ability? And I think today, too, especially for someone who would work in, say, a marketing role, that personal brand is going to be very, very important. So,
mm.
what proof of concept and proof of value?
I was
Yes,
just thinking about
exactly.
that as you said it.
Yeah, like how are they proving their
Yeah,
what they know
yeah.
outside of the resume? And usually, if all these things start falling into place, they get taken off the market almost instantly. And I think that's where the if the
Mm,
strategy is old, you're going to have that friction, and if it's new and modern, things are going to happen really quickly. But to do the modern strategy, to your point, I mean, it takes some some thinking, some working with
sure.
tools that may not be familiar, some agency that
Yeah.
may feel unfamiliar.
On the branding front, Sam, um, are do people miss that piece about, sort of at least visiting the idea of what's my brand here and therefore how do I present myself? Whether it's in the workplace or in the job search. Mhm.
Yes, a million times yes. For this, I would say the concept of a personal brand and that word brand throws people
It
off, and
does.
I understand why.
Sure.
It's like, oh, you want me to become a thought leader or an influencer
Yeah.
or whatever fill in the blank term you
Yeah.
want to say there, but
Nor
um,
is it a look at me type scenario. It's not that at all. Agree.
exactly. And I think in the career world, everyone knows people who are on LinkedIn posting these AI
Hmm.
like pieces all the time. And I think there's like not a super like positive connotation to that
I
concept.
agree.
But I would argue that every single person has a personal brand,
Whether you
no
like it
matter
or
what
not,
they,
and whether
yes,
you want it or not.
yes, 100%. And I think at a more basic level, it's like, are you clearly communicating to the world who you are, what you're interested in, what you do well, what value you bring?
Uh,
And I would say for 90% of people, that answer is usually no. And there's always room for improvement of
Absolutely.
many types. So,
Absolutely. Boy, that's so well said. A couple of examples I can think about. One, and I won't necessarily take us down this road, but when it comes to branding, I get severely irked by, let's say, in your neck of the woods in LA, where Hollywood people come out and start ranting about politics and just going off on these sorts of things. And honestly, I don't care what the politics are, and I don't care which side it comes from, but my first thought is, you just ruined your brand with me. I used to love you so much, and now you sound like a complete idiot. And that's just that alone, can substantially. Now, those are Hollywood people. Obviously, these are often very wealthy, and this usually comes towards the end of their career, so they don't care much about what. But still, the brand is the brand. So, but now, and the point is that you do have to be strategic about what the image is that you are putting out there. Again, if you want a promotion and you're known for being a jerk and can't get along with people, I mean, don't don't be looking for a promotion to manage people. Let's say that. Or when it comes to well, there's another that we could even use that. I have people, reach out to me, want to get on this podcast, and I research everybody personally. I have an assistant that helps me, but I usually look. And if I see a bunch of ranting and craziness on social media, I'm like, nope, don't want to have a talk with that person. And they could be just a wonderful guest, but ah, there's too many out there who have good things to say, like yourself, that I don't have to worry about if they're going to go off on my podcast.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's a very real problem
It
showing
is.
up in the career space and very outside of the career
Interesting.
space where everyone has this platform now and they can use it to
Yeah.
their benefit or detriment, and anyone can say anything regardless of how much expertise they have in a particular area.
Mhm.
Um,
Very well
yeah,
said.
I know we don't need
Yeah.
to even go on that.
No.
Everyone knows this part, but
Right.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's
But the real point that I think we're trying to express here is to take care of your brand. When I go on social media, I have opinions. I have things that really irritate me, and every now and then I respond to something that I don't think I should. And the big difference is I just step back for a second and say, Kevin, you're visceral about this right now. Do you really need do you even really need to say anything? I mean, is it anything that matters really other than it just pissed you off to see it or hear it? And then the answer is usually no, and then I just move on, because again, I'm not trying to fake who I am, but I'm trying to protect what I want people to understand about me and know about me and that sort of thing. Very, very interesting. Okay, so S.
Yeah, so S is my favorite and it's serve. And I think this is one that people also misunderstand, but it's essentially the concept of turning your work into visible value.
Interesting. Very nice.
And a big way to do this quickly is to be of service doing the thing that you're good at
Yeah.
doing. And even when I was launching my coaching business, especially starting out, people are like, who is this person? Like, do they know what they're doing?
Yeah.
All the things, right? That's the same thing in that most entrepreneurs will face or people starting something new. And so I was like, look, I'll offer my services for very, very low cost. I know I can be helpful. And
Mm.
by being of service to the people that I was working with, my brand grew really quickly because it was like, oh, it works and
Love
this
it.
is real.
Yeah.
And but I think even from like not necessarily like a charge low prices or
Right.
be like volunteer. I think there's always some type of value
Right.
specific to that particular person that can be of service, can be more visible, can translate into very
Yeah.
meaningful value quickly. Um,
Yeah. The question becomes, your own personal focus or mission. Is it focused on making money or is it focused on serving others? And both of them will bring you that. But I would submit to you, to your point, and you just proved it, that serving others is what will make you successful.
yeah,
Not
absolutely.
not
And
con it's not a hard concept.
oh yeah, and I mean even in these like podcasting conversations, like if
Yeah,
the host is of service to the person they're talking to, I think it becomes a much richer, much more wonderful conversation.
100%.
And there, I
100%.
mean, there's a million ways to approach this concept of serve, but it's a big one that helps a lot in this
No,
moving forward.
that's beautiful. And so then E, or if unless there's something else about S. Yeah.
No, I think S is great. So E is evolve. And this is one that every single person, regardless of whether or not they want to change careers, they want to stay the course, they want to leave course, whatever, just needs to be aware of. And it's evolve, which in the context of like building long-term resilience. So
Mm,
we are all in this AI era, regardless of how we feel about it, our opinions about it, it is here. And it's like, okay, so what do we all need to do to make sure that we're resilient for any change that will come? And there's a lot of hype, like if white collar work is going to completely disappear,
yeah.
who knows, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of conflicting
Yeah.
opinions, but
That really is.
yeah, we don't need to get into that one either.
Right.
But it's more like, okay, so say even if parts of my job change, am I ready to embrace the new parts that are coming? Do I know the tools? Do I know the scene for my specific industry?
Yeah.
Am I ready to like merge into whatever that is?
Yeah.
And do I have a general game plan for where this is headed? Yes or no? Um, a lot of different ways to do this, but I think it's just something that everyone should be thinking about is like, how am I going to evolve? as I move forward. And am I ready to do so?
Yeah, just the thought, just the concept of evolving. And it's kind of what I said in my opening about learning, growing, and changing just a little bit, each day. I want to kind of throw you a bit of a fastball. I mean, I don't think it'll be a fastball for you, but it's a little bit different. So I've got a couple of clients, but I also know other organizations that are same. Great organizations, great place to work. People love it. And for that reason, there's not a lot of turnover. But then you have people, let's say at the lower end, maybe employees or let's say frontline supervisors who want to grow, grow into the. They don't want to leave the company because they like it, but there's not any room because nobody's leaving. Do you have thoughts or advice about, what does a person do in that circumstance where they really want to take on more, but there's just not a lot of space at the top unless somebody dies or retires, is what the word is.
Yeah, I mean, how I would answer this is I think every organization as a whole has an opportunity for growth and needs to be thinking through everything we just talked about
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So these very stagnant organizations that aren't moving their people up, there's always an opportunity to create more, do more, serve more, evolve more. And I think anyone who wants to be in these higher leadership positions but isn't finding that there's a window for them, it's more of like, okay, so what are the opportunities available to your organization as a whole? And how can you, as a person, be the leader of whatever it is that comes up? And I would say most organizations are very receptive to this as a concept where it's like, it's not threatening anyone's position, but it's helping everyone grow. It's helping the organization grow, and
Wow.
usually will land that person in some type of leadership role, maybe even leading a new part of the company that doesn't exist as it stands
Yeah.
now.
I love that answer. And, I think it's fair to say that I've always operated from the premise that none of us are indispensable. I mean, listen, that's life. But at the same time, you can make yourself hard to get rid of from the standpoint that to what you just said, you find opportunities, you take on some additional work or take on a project, for the organization, let people know you're hungry and you want more. And I believe, especially in the smaller companies, but maybe in large companies as well, that the conversation usually comes up like, "Hey, Sam, man, Sam is a go-getter. She's crushing it. Oh, we can't afford to lose her." I mean, those conversations come up, and it's because, again, not they're not saying you're indispensable. They're saying, it would be a big loss for us, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
you prep yourself to evolve in even in your own circumstance.
Yeah. And I think just being fantastic at the work you do and
How about
really
that?
putting a lot of effort in can make a massive difference. And I've seen and had some clients with salary negotiations where essentially they, and this is not necessarily good practice, but threaten to leave
Understood.
and are given more money to not do so.
Right, right,
And
right,
so
right,
it
right, right,
works.
right. You
Yeah.
got the right soft skills. You can still do that without demanding because some of them be like, okay, well, sorry, cheers. What I
Yeah.
mean? So no, I love what you're saying there, though. It's very, very well said. I want to shift just a tad and ask you about women and women having children specifically, or who want to have children. Have you had clients like this? Do you have ideas or thoughts about, what you know? How because it's I mean, I know it's 2026, but it's still a struggle, and I'm going to try to be balanced in my approach to this. That on the one hand, yeah, especially let's say a small organization, they got to manage their company, but on the other hand, I'm an advocate for women taking time and bearing children and doing that thing as well. I mean, so I think there's, I don't know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean,
It's a
this is
tough one.
something where, yeah, I wish I could be like, we're in 2026 and all organizations are really generous with their
Yeah,
maternity leave and their promotions. And I mean, there's story after story that comes out of people being like laid off or
yeah,
passed over for promotions. And
yeah,
I think even when someone is pregnant, it's hard for them to advocate well within a company necessarily if they're like wanting a new promotion or contract to be signed.
yeah.
Usually there's pressure to still hide that pregnancy for longer periods of time.
Wow.
And I wish I could say like, oh, this is the solution, other than just advocacy and continuing
Yeah,
to support organizations that do this well.
yeah,
Um, I do think it's still going to be something that's tricky and still something a lot of
yeah.
working moms are navigating. as we speak.
This problem has been on going on for so long that again, just me practically thinking with common sense that it's a real issue. So on the one hand, there are companies that they can't afford it, to be as generous as they would maybe even like to be with women who are pregnant, have and maternity leave, all that sort of thing. So I think that's an important concept. On the other hand, I would, and I assume you would endorse this, you know, advocate to those companies who can afford it, do it. There's life's got to go on, and it's a natural thing. And let's not be, if you can do it, don't chip away at it. Just now, I'm getting on a rant just for the shareholders. I mean, do the right thing. I guess it is. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and I think there's so much value to
Absolutely,
supporting the parents, but yeah, both male and female
100%.
parents who are coming through this process. And again, I wish I had some of these statistics off the top of my head of like working moms are not a productivity drain at all. There's a lot of studies
Right.
to support that. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of companies that are maybe holding on to these
Yeah.
older notions of like, it's going to cost us X amount of money for this person to be
Correct.
gone for 4 months, may
Yeah.
not be thinking about it as
Yeah.
fully maybe as the truth of the
I think
situation.
that's very, very well said. Sam, what are people missing? What would you say is like the big miss when they're out job searching? Let's say they got laid off and now they're embarking into the job. And let's say they've been working for 5 years. So, they've gotten into a good routine. They're out of, it's kind of like they haven't been dating in a long time. Now they got to go back out and flirt with the job market. What is the big miss, do you think, that takes place?
I think the main miss is similar to what we discussed of like what playbook are you following and
Oh,
from what era is that playbook from?
hmm.
I think if someone is 5 years into the job market and is looking at the advice they got from their
Mm.
college job board, um, I would say pause. Is that relevant to today? And I think this is again with like that R recognize of like what rules am I following? Are they true? Am I missing out on something because of those rules? Um,
Wow.
yeah.
You did say that, but you so smartly brought it back up again, because yes, you're exactly right. Also, what does agency mean in a market that feels unstable? How would you sort of pull those two ideas together?
I think anytime that someone is leaving all of their career prospects in the hands of someone else, I would argue there's opportunities for more agency. So whether that's
Mm,
waiting for a promotion from a manager who may or may not be giving one, I would say there's opportunities for agency or applying endlessly to jobs on LinkedIn to hear nothing. I would say there's opportunities for agency. And I would say even if like they want a traditional job, they've been in a traditional job, they want to go that direction, there's always opportunities to expand that strategy and take on more projects, more ownership, more value, more visible value. And in the age of all the gig work and like portfolio careers and some of these other things that are coming up, maybe there's some opportunity to maintain stability in these periods of transition that were not
yeah,
available before. And I would argue that everyone has a lot to gain by looking into what a contract role in the interim might look like,
yeah.
what taking on a project for a volunteer organization they're part of, what there's a lot of things that are good to do besides like sitting there shooting off applications into the computer.
Right. Gosh, I love that what you're saying. And I do from, you know, just hanging out in certain circles, having conversations with a lot of people. I do see a lot of that, just and I honestly never thought about it in the way that you've presented it, but just the old school way of doing things. You know, maybe it's a friend or a colleague or something. Yeah, I've put in, hundreds of resumes and I might even ask, what else have you done? Well, what else can I do? I'm like, go talk to Sam, probably. She'll
I'll take them.
she'll share with you sort of the new age way of approaching job search, because I think you're exactly right. People are stuck in this, and they shouldn't be, by the way. They really shouldn't be. Not in 2026 when you've got AI, when you've got YouTube, when you've got people like Sam who can really bring ideas to the table and make you think differently. I'll say one other thing that you've mentioned as a theme, and I absolutely love this about what you're saying. You have said more than two or three times about this idea of being helpful, being useful, being of contributing, in one form or the other. And God rest his soul, my father. I've always used this as a metaphor in life, if you will, or analogy, or whatever. And the, sorry, it's going to sound a little sour, but when we were kids, and like, you know, hard work was just what he demanded, sometimes overly demanded, but we would often do stuff together. And he would always say if he saw us doing this, and I did a lot of it because I was very much a daydreamer. He would say, "Stop standing around with your thumb up your butt and do something." I
Yep.
mean, I mean, but to me, I haven't said it in that way to my daughters, but I've suggested the same thing. You know, be useful. Don't stand around and watch people do stuff. Jump in and help. And so again, there's a broader idea that I think you're bringing to the table here. You didn't say those words, but it's true. Even in your organization, if you want to get ahead, don't stand around and just watch. Jump out and do something, make yourself useful. You've said more than once. I love that concept, and it's such a basic practice.
Yeah, and frankly, it's pretty easy to do. I
It
think there's
really is.
always an opportunity to do something.
Mm.
Um, so I think it's a really easy action step to regain some agency, but also just enjoy work and life more, just to be more in the mix,
In
if
the
I
mix,
will.
yeah, and the opportunities that brings, by just stretching a little bit more. So one more question, really kind of two more questions. I want to ask you in a moment about your book to come and, a little bit about that and what you're doing. But I also want to ask about this idea um, of too much comfort for people that are in a job. I think you would probably agree that, well, you've kind of said it, we sort of talked about it, that, man, you just can't count on anything. I mean, you can wake up, feel completely 100% secure in your job, show up, and and the HR person shows up with this frown on their face saying, "I'm so sorry, we're gonna have to lay you off." And I just, I guess I'm just asking you to say a word or two about getting, even in a job that you've been with a while, you feel quite secure, you think you're in control, to not rest on that laurel. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think I completely agree. I think this is a tricky one because this can be very anxiety inducing for
Okay,
people or
fair enough.
I mean,
Yeah.
but I'm not saying we shouldn't think
No,
about
I'm
it. It's
tracking.
more
Yeah.
just
I hadn't thought about that, but
yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
Well, and I think to your point, like nothing is as secure as we think it is.
Yeah.
I generally tell everyone, like, just have your resume at least loosely updated. Be thinking about this evolve category, regardless of how stable you feel. There's even things that could happen in your job. Say
Yeah.
you are stable, but they bring in a manager who is really challenging to work under, whatever. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, just to be ready. And I would say too, whenever anyone is very, very comfortable, I would always argue like, what value are we preserving by valuing comfort over
Hmm.
growth or
Yeah.
over anything else? Not to say it's a bad value, more just like, are we
Right.
sure we're doing this for the right reason? Do we really truly love this job, or is it just easy to stay?
Yeah.
Um, I think that's a good question for everyone to always ask and be
Wow.
thinking about, regardless of the answer.
Yeah. And I've told the story on multiple podcasts. So if you're happen to watch multiple of my podcasts, you're going to hear me say it again. A friend that I haven't seen him in a long time, so I feel safe saying this, but it used to be that I would see him maybe once a year, because of, really we were more, my daughters and his daughter were close in school, and we'd run into him somewhere at school or something, maybe a couple times a year. And I always say, and I'll just call him Joe, "Hey, Joe, how you been?" And almost every single time, the first words out of his mouth was a eye roll, I'm still at so and so, and the place sucks. And he would go off on this rant, and he would say this every single time. I finally said, because I got tired of hearing it. I mean, this went on for years, years, at least a decade. I said, dude, why don't you go get you another job? And he quickly, fell back on his heels. Ah, the benefits, bills, all these other sorts of things. But I'm looking at my watch. I said, yeah, but it's been 10 years you've been saying this. You can figure that out in 10 years? Thoughts?
Yes, I mean, I a lot of these people come into my coaching practice eventually, and I think it's one where I always encourage like nothing is official until you have a signature on paper.
How
So
about that?
if he wants to explore another option, he's not committing to anything until
Correct.
signature is on paper. And so always with people like that, if it's like that's the narrative that's coming up, like just take a few steps forward, see what happens, start just
Yeah.
exploring. You're not committing to anything. If the benefits and everything from your old job are so good, like fine, you're not committing to anything. It's
Lay
okay. Like
back and quit
usually,
complaining.
yeah. But I don't think I've ever had someone ever who we collectively in coaching pushed out of a situation like that into a new situation that was like,
Right.
I wish I stayed. Like never
Right.
has that ever happened. So.
Fair enough. No, well said. And I really like your idea there about just put your toe in the water somewhere, just say, go to a meeting or two of something, the Chamber of Commerce hangouts, whatever, and just talk to people. You don't have to do anything. Just kind of get outside of that thinking in any ways. So listen, Sam, tell us about your book and when's it coming out and just a little bit about it. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, so the book is called Work Rewritten, and essentially breaks down a lot of what we were just talking about in much, much more detail.
Mm.
And I go through that entire RISE framework, but every single chapter in the book has an actionable tool.
Oh,
So
nice.
there's a lot of different ways that are 10 to 15 minute
Hmm.
long activities to
Hmm.
take whatever the concept is, apply it into your life immediately, and start seeing the returns. So essentially by the end of the book, anyone who reads it will have a working mental model for exactly how to move themselves into the future of work.
Oh,
Um,
geez. Yeah, please keep going.
so,
Yeah.
oh yeah, no, I mean, I'm very excited. I feel really passionate about a lot of the things I'm bringing in, and I'm excited to be able to share a lot of what has been developed in my coaching practice more widely, make it affordable and accessible to anyone who wants to go on this journey. And it will be coming out likely in 2027 at some point,
Nice.
but so have a little bit of hold until then. But if people want to see my frameworks and my writing, I write on Substack weekly and we'll be dropping a lot of this content.
Oh, very nice. Glad to
Yeah.
hear that. Glad to hear that. So listen, one last question before we go, and then I'm going to ask where people can find you. Do you have, and again, it can be something you've already mentioned, but I ask all my guests, what's one thing that you would encourage or recommend to people that if they took it on, if they did it, it would immediately improve their lives, even if it's just a little thing?
Yeah, something I would suggest is there's just a general way of thinking that's like there's opportunity everywhere. Whether or not you
Mm.
believe that,
Mm.
fine. But I would say do an opportunity brainstorm, which is literally just like sit down with a piece of paper, some sticky notes, even like sit with your computer and be like, okay, so if it's true that there's opportunity everywhere available to me, what are those opportunities? And force yourself to come up with a list of 20 to 30 things.
Oh my.
And I get a lot of people that will be like 20 to 30, like, what are you talking about? But when they start really thinking about it and start brainstorming, all of a sudden it's like, oh, there are a million things I can
40
do.
or 50 they show up with. Yeah.
Exactly.
Love it.
And in a very short period of time, the world opens up in a very big way. So I
Wow.
suggest everyone take advantage of that if they have a bit of
That's
time.
such a great idea. And I say that very, very earnestly because it's easy to do. You just sit down with yourself, get in a quiet spot, go sit up against a tree, and just what are opportunities out there? And just let your mind be free. And it might, yeah, I think you're right. It might shock you, you know. Uh, and when you add a curiosity on top of that, let's say you end up with 20 things, And then you spot one that, oh, I never thought about that, but I'm really curious about that. To your point, that steps you out there. That makes you go, the mind wants to figure out why you're so curious about it. It's a beautiful thing. Well, listen, will you share with the audience as much as you'd like to share, whatever you'd like to share? Where can people find you? Where can they find their work? You said at Substack and, social media, whatever it is.
Yeah, so you can find me at my website, workrewritten.com, or at pretty much any social media channel at by Work Rewritten. My main ones that I'm interacting a lot with people on are Substack, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So
That's
I would
perfect.
love to talk to anyone. I take free strategy calls as well. So if anyone wants a really
Yeah.
quick strategy, you can find the link to do that on my
Yeah.
website.
And I know about strategy calls and all those sorts of things, but one of the things I really like about what I'm hearing here is one, you really know what you're talking about. And I feel like I can say that very earnestly. But two, you're a good person and you're not the kind of person that's just going to try to talk somebody into something that they don't really need. And so I think the combination of good character and good competence is a beautiful thing that I think you can own there, Miss Sam.
Well, thank you so much. I take that compliment very seriously. So I appreciate that.
Yes, indeed. Listen, it's a real pleasure to have you on Grow Yourself. Thank you for all this great information and I look forward to having you come back when your book comes out.
Great. I would love to do that. And yeah, I'm excited for that time.
All right, folks, go look up Sam Alvita. She's got the real goods. So thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you again and have a good one, Kevin.
You bet.